Surprised he was here.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the City of Everett Planning Commission meeting. This is October 20th, and we'll start out with our Planning Commission roll call.
Chair Stewart,
Here.
Commissioner Holland,
Here.
Commissioner Adams.
Here.
Commissioner Sand,
Here.
Commissioner Jordison,
Here.
Commissioner Tisdale,
Here.
Commissioner Beck,
Here.
Commissioner Zelinski,
Here.
Very good. I'm glad to see we've got a quorum tonight. In fact, we've got a full house, so good job. All right, so next we have approval of meeting minutes, and we actually have two sets of minutes. We've kept our staff busy, so we've got the meeting minutes from September 15th. Has everyone had a chance to review these minutes, and are there any comments or corrections? Commissioner Jordison.
I have one comment. One of my, on page 10, I see a statement in there, and it was basically paraphrasing something that I had said. It said, Commissioner Jordison stated that he did email, blah, yada, yada, yada. He felt that the only reason the city was considering the amendment was to enforce on nuisance violations. And I didn't use the term nuisance. I think somebody may have, but it wasn't me. And I wasn't acknowledging that there were any violations. So I think that the intent was to facilitate some enforcement, but I didn't acknowledge that there were any violations, and I wouldn't apply the term nuisance because it's just not, it's not specific enough.
Okay.
So I would say that I felt that what the intent was to facilitate enforcement actions, maybe against alleged violations.
Okay.
That's the only comment that I have. I understand that the city council actually reads these things, so I'd like to have at least my statements read correctly. So that's all I have. Thank you.
I'll make the change.
Thank you for that correction. Any other comments about the meeting minutes from September 15th? If not, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Zelinski,
Yes.
Commissioner Beck,
Yes.
Commissioner Tisdale,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordison,
Yes.
Commissioner Sand,
Yes.
Commissioner Adams.
Yes.
Commissioner Holland,
Yes.
Chair Stewart,
Yes. Thank you. Now, we have meeting minutes from our last meeting, October 6th. And now there were only 3 commissioners in attendance, but as I recollect, we are able to, if all of the commissioners have had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes, everyone can vote, even if you weren't in attendance last time. So we should be able to have the 4 necessary votes to approve it. So, anybody have any comments, corrections for those meeting minutes? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve the meeting minutes from October 6th?
So moved. Second.
Commissioner Zelinski,
Yes.
Commissioner Beck. Yes. Commissioner Tisdale,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordison,
Yes.
Commissioner Sand. Yes. Commissioner Adams.
Yes.
Commissioner Holland,
Yes.
Chair Stewart,
Yes, thank you. All right, next on our agenda are reports from the commission members. So we'll start with Commissioner Zelinski.
No report, Madam Chair.
No report.
No report.
I participated in Green Everett at Forest Park this weekend, and I wasn't the only one there. I'll let Chair Stewart tell you all about it. No report.
No report. No report.
All right, yes, so this was part of a planting morning session, planting trees and shrubs at Forest Park, and it was hosted by the City of Everett Parks Department, and I was there representing the City of Everett Tree Committee. and was happy to see a fellow planning commissioner there. I think there were over 100 people who attended that event. It was the second year that Forterra has a partnership with the city of Everett, and so they have had pretty good success, I think, with people coming out. So, and it didn't rain, so that was really a blessing, because that was Saturday morning when they had forecasted rain, so that worked out great. Other reports, the tree committee did meet last week, and there's 2 items that would be of interest to this group, I think. So the Parks Department, City of Everett Parks Department is beginning an update of the Parks Comprehensive Plan. And they're at the very beginning stages where they've been holding listening sessions with the community. They didn't get as good a turnout as they were hoping, so they're going to continue doing some public outreach right at the beginning of doing the update. And then the city's tree policy is going to be updated this next year also. So I'll let you know as we get into more of the substance on those 2 things. So that concludes my report, and then staff comments.
Yes, thank you. 2 items. One, we'd like to ask the commission to stay for a minute after the meeting is over to take a picture for the upcoming boards and commissions reception. We'd like to get an updated picture for the commission for that event. Second item is the city council will be holding a public hearing tomorrow night on your recommendation concerning the comp plan update and the related ordinances. And so that meeting begins at 6:30 tomorrow night. And that's all I have tonight.
Very good, thank you. And now's an opportunity for citizen comments, and we ask you to, if these are comments on either of our 2 items on the agenda, you'll have an opportunity later to talk about those. But if there's something else that you would like to bring before the Planning Commission tonight, this is your chance. You could approach the podium. Seeing none, I guess we'll go ahead and start. Item number 1 is, so both of these 2 items, the Planning Commission did hear presentations from staff at our last meeting, but we do have a new memo from staff dated September 30th. So would staff like to introduce the item number 1? And I'm not sure if you want to separate it from number 2, how you'd like to do that?
It's the same memo.
Separate.
Okay. I believe the memo is the same as last commission meeting.
Oh, okay.
Just to verify, but we do not have any PowerPoint presentation to go over. The 2 items were, as Chair Stewart mentioned, presented in the last commission meeting on October 6th. We understand that some of the absent commissioners had an opportunity to review the webcam. But just to overview, the 2 items are a request for Planning Commission to consider a motion to amend the special property use regulations in the zoning code. The first one would be for community centers. The request specifically was for community centers and residential zones, but we're going to look at it comprehensively throughout the entire city. And then the second item was or is to allow for alternative uses or adaptive reuses of churches and residential properties or residential zones. So if there's any questions or any specific things on those 2, I can answer those.
Yeah, do any of the commissioners have questions right now? And if not, there are people in the audience who might want to speak about this and could help answer questions. So any questions, Commissioner Zelinski?
Yeah, I just have one question. The items both cite to the special property use permit process.
Correct.
Could you give kind of a quick synopsis of what that process is?
The special property use process?
Yes.
There are general criteria. There are 11 criteria. I can review those real quickly if you want. But for a special property use, throughout the city, regardless of the review process, whether it's administrative or if it goes up to the hearing examiner, has to meet those general criteria. special property uses in residential zones have a higher review process. It's a review process 3 that goes through the hearing examiner, and most of those have specific additional criteria that have to be reviewed. A review process 1 has a more narrow distribution for community notice. It's 150 feet, whereas a review process 3 in the residential zones goes out to 500 feet, so the notification is greater.
Are there kind of a list of different uses that qualify for this, or is it open-ended?
Specific uses, churches in residential zones, hospitals, clinics.
Okay, so a specific finite list.
Correct.
The community centers would then be added to that list.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Other questions, comments? Commissioner Adams.
I just have a real quick request. I think everyone here probably knows this, but can you talk about the initiation? Like, this is just an initiation of a request for consideration. I think sometimes that gets confusing about whether we're looking at the issue or the request, and I think most of the commissioners know this, but I think it's probably important to say every time, so.
Correct. So this would be a request to initiate staff to start reviewing different regulations that could be put into effect. So that there would be a workshop that would be, we would bring this forward probably in November, early December, and then after that, a public hearing either in December or the first part of next year.
Great, thank you.
Other comments, questions? Seeing none, I'd like to open it up to people in the audience. If anybody would like to address the Planning Commission on item number 1, which is related to initiating consideration of an amendment to the zoning code to allow community centers in residential zones through the special property use permit process. Is there anyone who would like to speak to us tonight about that? Seeing none? Oh, yes, okay. So if you wouldn't mind saying your name and your address for the record.
Hi, I'm Heather Wallace, and my address is 5101 Wilmington Avenue. It's in the Glacier View neighborhood, which specifically concerns item number 1. So I'm a neighbor, we've been in the neighborhood about 10 years, and we've been Y members about 5, so it's kind of a blending of our two worlds. And I went to the initial neighborhood meeting 2 meetings ago, and the Y was there. Initial, like, not even groundbreaking, nothing's happened, but reaching out to the neighborhood, and it got a lot of our neighbors out and meeting, which was encouraging just as a community standpoint. The Y's already started neighbors talking, and it was positive as far as I can see. When I look at my neighborhood, it's an aging neighborhood. It's beautiful, but I have a lot of elderly neighbors. So looking ahead 20 years, I see a lot of turnover happening in my neighborhood. And I look at the Y downtown, and it's a 100-year-old building, and it's still standing. It's still it's occupied. It's a major pillar of our community. And I see the change that's going to be happening to Glacier View, which is inevitable with aging, it's the time to start putting those kind of things into our neighborhood and really going along with the changes that are coming forward. It's been an incredible part of our community, and I'm happy to see it possibly coming into my neighborhood. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else care to comment about item number 1?
My name is Karen Berhanovich. My address is 4727 Vermont Drive, and I also in the same neighborhood. And I also attended the neighborhood meeting. I do appreciate the YMCA for coming in and making the neighborhood feel a part of this. And I know the ones that I've talked to along with Heather we're very excited about this. And I've been in the neighborhood for 30 years, and you do see the transition of the older to the newer, and I'm very excited. I hope you do consider this. I think it's a great asset to the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. So turning to my fellow commissioners. So do I hear a motion, unless there's further discussion or comments? And Commissioner Adams?
I just have a quick disclosure. I said this 2 weeks ago, and I say it every time it comes in front of us, but I sit on the board at the Everett YMCA, and so I just want to make sure, in terms of disclosure issues, that's on the record each time, so.
And I guess, does it make a difference if we're members of the YMCA? I guess I should disclose that my family is a member of the longtime members of the Everett YMCA. Any other?
I'll second that.
I just have a comment.
Yes.
Actually, I lived a half a block from that site, and these folks were probably my neighbors at one time, but I lived on Rucker Street, just a half block down from the, and we used to go out in the snow, and we'd sleigh on those hills and build snowmen out there, and there's a lot of good memories on that site. It's the school district property, and it's sort of underutilized. I was a little concerned that you basically have sort of an island of residential use, single-family residential use surrounded by commercial, and it's kind of like, you've got Colby on one side and Evergreen on the other side, and I was a little bit concerned that it's going to be sort of impactful to the neighborhood, but then, if you go to the YMCA in Mukilteo, it's surrounded by, it's got residential adjacent to it, and it doesn't seem to be disruptive to the neighborhood. And I'm glad to hear the sort of the positive comments from the neighbors on this. I was a little concerned that, but it is a neighborhood sort of in transition, and I don't think that the YMCA would be incompatible with the neighborhood. So that gives me a sort of a good feeling about it, and having a lot of memories in that neighborhood. I'm glad to hear that so far that we haven't heard anything, negative about the Y possibly coming into that area. So.
Okay, I guess I definitely want to comment, though, keeping in mind that this consideration is not site-specific, so it's a code amendment that's being talked about. So it would be community-wide relating to the zoning code definition. So even though we're referring to a specific use on a specific site, just making sure you realize it is community-wide. So, Commissioner Sand?
I guess I should disclose my wife's been a longtime member as well, and I'm embarrassed to say I'm not. I should be, but I'm not. As I understand it, this would put the community center within the special use categories for consideration, but it would apply to all zones and citywide?
Well, that's something that is yet to be decided, and you will have the opportunity to make that decision.
Okay.
The code amendment, we haven't done much research on it yet or provided or drafted any options, but you do have the option of making it, for example, review process 3 in a residential zone if you support a change, or perhaps a lower level of review process if it were in a commercial zone or an industrial zone. It may be just an outright permitted use. Perhaps you can take a different approach depending upon the zone and the location in the city.
Thank you. And I did take the suggestion of those who were here at the last meeting and reviewed the tape, so I'm aware of the conversation and testimony that took place.
Thank you for doing that. Any other comments from the commissioners? Seeing none, do I hear a motion regarding this item? So what we're looking for would be a motion to initiate consideration of an amendment to the zoning code. Commissioner Sand?
I'll make a motion to request initiation of consideration of an amendment to the zoning code to allow community centers in residential zones through a special property use permit, but then that ties it to just residential zones, and I think it should be much broader than that. So it would be zoning code to allow community centers through a special use permit without regard to specific zones.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second.
Commissioner Zelinski?
Just clarification, am I voting tonight?
No, you're not. I'm not calling you. Ignore that. Commissioner Beck?
Yes.
Commissioner Tisdale?
Yes.
Commissioner Jordison?
Yes.
Commissioner Sand?
Yes.
Commissioner Adams?
Yes.
Commissioner Holland?
Yes.
Chair Stewart?
Yes. Thank you. All right, now we're moving to item number 2, which is a request to initiate consideration of amendment to the zoning code to allow alternative uses in churches located in residential zones through the special property use permit process. So the staff memo that we have dated September 30th, the second paragraph refers to this item number 2, and then we also have a letter from Faith Lutheran regarding that item. Any discussion amongst the commission? Commissioner Jordison?
I know, I'm ready to make a motion to, initiate consideration.
We might have somebody in the audience who would like to speak to this item before we do that,
Okay,
but hold that thought.
okay.
Any questions or discussion right now with the commissioners? Okay. Is there anybody in attendance who would like to speak?
Hi, my name's Melissa Springer. I guess my question would be, what constitutes a church? Does it have to be an established church? Could it be the Church of Black Cats? Could it be, what is the criteria that is considered in this to be a church within a residential area? So that would be one of my questions. And I understand that this is initiation for the process, which is, I'll worry about the other things after that happens. But I guess my question is, what is the definition that you all are using for a church?
Okay. Excuse me, would you mind saying your address for the record also, please?
1710 Wetmore.
Very much. Anybody else care to speak to this item?
Kent Peverly, 312 Pex Drive, here in Everett. In response to that question there, in my mind, a church is, in consideration of this proposed amendment, would be an existing facility used as a church. But I guess other people have to address that question. The point I want to address is, and hope that the consideration of a change like this would make provision for a church to, for a facility to revert back to being used as a church if there was a buyer or user that needed that facility. And this is brought about by Commissioner Stewart's comment last meeting, in which she pointed out that there's a lot of churches meeting in schools. And in addition to that, there's a lot of small churches, new churches, sharing facilities, especially the Latino churches. We see them. We see 2 billboards there in front of church buildings, one in Spanish, one in English. And I think it's indicative of while older churches, established churches are declining, we have a lot of younger churches, newer churches being established. And while they may not at this point be able financially to purchase a facility, at some point they may. And we want to make sure there's facilities available so that they don't have to go through a whole building program and reestablish a new church someplace, wherever, and at the same time be able to move into a facility that they can use and call their own. So I would hope that the process that would be established would allow that to still happen, so that we don't lose churches' capacity in this city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else care to comment on this item number 2 on our agenda? Seeing none. All right, back to, so Commissioner Jordison, unless there's some discussion or comments, I think we're ready for your motion.
Okay, my motion is to initiate consideration of an amendment to the zoning code to allow alternative uses in churches located in residential zones through the special property use permit process.
And I'll second that, and I want to add, thank you for the two very good comments. I appreciate those, and I think those should both be obviously part of the discussion that we have going forward, so thank you for adding that. But I'd like to second the motion.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second.
Commissioner Beck?
Yes.
Commissioner Tisdale?
Yes.
Commissioner Jordison?
Yes.
Commissioner Sand? Yes. Commissioner Adams?
Yes.
Commissioner Holland?
Yes.
Chair Stewart?
Yes. All right. So those are our two items on the agenda for this evening. So I believe then we're adjourned for tonight. Thank you.